Hi, Krista. I'm so happy to see you today. How are you?
I'm doing awesome today. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, I feel like I've really known you forever, like so many years that I can really remember. And I've known you to be so committed to working with plants. And I'm really happy that you're willing to share your experience with us today. Uh, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to working with plants
Yeah.
medicine?
Yeah, so I was actually in grad school, so I was doing my doctorate program, and there were two people that were really close to me that were like, "You have to try ayahuasca," and they
Oh,
explained it to me, and so I did my first experience in 2011,
oh,
and I sat in just one ayahuasca ceremony, and then eventually I met one of my teachers, who somebody who eventually became my teacher, and I started working with her more often and started to get really called into doing that work, and eventually she invited me in to learn from her and apprentice from her. So that just it just became a big part of my life. So I was doing my doctorate program, but then also apprenticing with on the
mm.
medicine path through the Shipibo lineage at the same time.
Oh, I see. So it was out of curiosity, like a friend asked you to try out, or you were not aware of that before?
I was aware of it, but it took somebody else doing it. I thought maybe I would do it at some point, but these two people were really close to me, and they were just expressing just how it's different from other plant medicine, and they had pretty powerful, more of a
Mm.
spiritual awakening and experience, and that was something that I became super curious about.
Mm. Oh, I see. Well, that's great. So can you tell us a little bit what your journey, connecting with Noya Rao? Can you even tell us what is Noya Rao plant and
Yeah.
what is your journey connecting with that plant?
Yeah, so it actually took me several years before I connected to Noya Rao. So it was about 5 years into my journey. And I had been working with a woman, and I had done a lot of work with other plants. But then I
Mm.
ended up leaving that community and connecting to another woman who also was trained in the Shipibo tradition, but she had been working with this plant Noya Rao, which I
Mm.
didn't really know a whole lot about, but at the time I was going through a lot, and I had Lyme disease, and there were just a lot of things that were happening energetically. And so she was making Noya Rao for me, to have me work with it to support the things that I was going through. And eventually I went a lot deeper in connecting with her, but she's a very unique plant, because once I started working with her, I'm like, this is totally different now. Like it
Mm.
changed the path, because,
Oh,
my doctorate was, studying East West psychology. So there was an aspect where I was interested in, non duality and
yeah.
that path as well. And so Noy Rao is a enlightened being. So not all plants come in this enlightened way. They can be similar to humans, that they have their personal agendas, and there's a dark and light side to these different plants. But Noya Rao is just a pure incarnation of the divine,
Okay.
and she grows she grows in Peru. So she's a super tall jungle tree. Her
Mm.
leaves glow at night, so there's this magical essence of her. And there's only a few of them. I think
Mm.
people have said there's probably more, but recently it was that there was only six, and that the story is that they were on planet Earth and then disappeared for a while, and then recently started
Mm.
to come back.
Okay. Oh. So you said that when you started working with her, you felt like, oh, this is going to be different. So I feel like you mean there was like a kind of shift, like something that really happened to make you feel like, okay, this time. So, can you go deeper a little bit? Can you, because I feel like there is something that you want to say there. Like there was a shift, like something happened that made you feel like, okay, right now I feel like it's the real deal.
Yeah. I think it was also maybe partially connected to the lineage that I started with and
Okay.
the ways that I learned things there. But Noya Rao was undoing a lot of that because some of
Oh,
those things that I learned were based in fear and a fear based way of holding ceremony
okay.
and certain practices that were that way. And so she was undoing that of
Oh,
holding space from a much greater level of trust that there's something
yeah,
much bigger than you that's holding the space. And so
yeah,
the little you that think is holding the space is,
yeah,
that's not really how it's happening.
yeah,
So a much deeper path of trusting and holding space from a place of really bringing in a lot of light and love into the space, which is
yeah.
not the modeling that I had gotten in the with the previous teacher that I had.
Wow. I like a word that you use there describing that plan when you say it was undoing some of the things that you were working with before. That was based on fear. So I just love the way you describe it. Like, I don't know, for some reason I connect with that word, undoing, because there's
Hmm.
so many things that we have learned that in a way weren't maybe the right way, or that, like you said, based really on fear. Like when everything is so negative, based on fear, it really conditions a lot of things about our lives, right? And I like that you said that that plan helped you undo that. So you feel like at that moment, because previously it was based on fear. So, but working with her, it wasn't based on fear anymore. It was like empowering you. It was like, can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I
How,
would
how do
say,
you work with that? Yeah.
quite a long journey. I'm still on that journey, but
Okay.
she's coming from that non-dual perspective, which is everything's an aspect of the divine, everything is
Oh,
love. Anything that you're
yeah.
perceiving outside of that is just part of your conditioning. So this idea that you're ever alone or separate or that darkness is bad and or any of those concepts, that conditioning or just ways that we've grown up, in whatever lineage or tradition, there's many aspects of that, but it's about undoing all that conditioning. I mean, it's obviously, you
Okay.
can imagine it's like a lifelong path to be able to do
Yeah.
that because that's
Yeah.
essentially enlightenment to get to a place where you're like, oh yeah, I'm not attached to anything. I
Yeah.
recognize that everything is connected, that unity consciousness. And so that's been a big aspect of the journey and a deep
Yeah.
dive into all the fears that are there that that make it difficult for you to connect to your true essence or the truth
Yeah.
of existence.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. I really, I've done some experiences where if I react to something based on hatred and anger and fear, and when I react to the same thing based on peace, love, and acceptance, I can see in my body the difference. So I can imagine how that plan really helps you to, yeah, to do that. Yeah, I really love it. So how long have you been working with her? That plan?
So 2016, so I guess it's been about 8 years.
Wow, it's a pretty long time.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay, great. So can you describe how you work with her?
Yeah. So mostly, I mean, in the Shipibo tradition, a lot of what the
Mm,
training is to forge connections with different plants, and so
mm,
it's not just an ayahuasca ceremony or whatever, however you're conducting the healing. It's really about the relationships that you've created with different plants. And so you'll
mm,
do periods of time where you're in isolation, somebody will who has that connection will help connect you to that plan, and then it teaches you over time. So that's like your main teacher. It's you have mentors and teachers in the human form, but a lot of them will point you back to, well, what did the plant say? You know what?
Yeah.
That's where the learning happens. So it's been about connecting with her, and then also doing really deep healing work for myself first, because that's where a lot of the learning happens. Is if you can understand how she's working with you to heal yourself, then you know how to work with her to heal others. And so in that tradition and training, you're learning how to bring and deliver that medicine. So in the Shipibo lineage, it's, you're chanting, you're channeling, you're bringing that energy through. You try to get out of the way and just deliver that medicine. And so that's how I work with her, is through that energetic transmission and working with her through chanting.
Mm. Okay, I see. So, because the work that you do is deeply spiritual and communicating with plants is a very, very spiritual thing. And when you say that your teacher usually asks you, what does the plant say, right? So, it means that there is a communication, an interaction between you and the plant medicine. So, can you tell us a little bit like that communication? Like, what does the plant say? Like, for example, in religion, when people believers say God told me, like people usually ask, like, how did he like talk to you, like human talk to you, or did you talk to you in a dream, or so? I'm a little curious when you say, when your teacher asks you, what does the plant say? Uh, is there a way that you can explain a little bit that, like, how is it through dreams? Is it through some kind of body manifest? How can you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about that kind of communication?
Yeah, I mean, it can happen so many different ways, but dreams is actually a big one. When you open up that experience, what they call a dieta, where you're holding a strict diet, your isolation, you're just connecting to that plant. It actually
Mm.
gets really clear in those moments, because
Oh,
the technology of that diet is that it makes you more open and way more sensitive. So
okay.
sometimes when you're tuning into communication, it might be more subtle and there might be some interpretation. But I find, like, when doing a diet, it's just very clear communication. So mostly it comes to me through, like, more cognitively. So it's just like I'll
Oh,
hear messages come through. And then dreams, when you're dieting, sometimes people will have experiences where you have lucid dreams and the plant will come in and teach you different things. So I had that happen a lot at the beginning, where I would encounter things on a spiritual level energetically, and then the plants would teach me, like, okay, now you need to call us in, and you need
yeah.
to intend this, and this is how you're going to work with that energy. And so lots of practice in the dream world, but then also so many different other communications, like synchronicities is the big one. Like,
Oh,
something interesting will happen and you're like, okay, that's my diet speaking to me. You just feel it. There's just a knowing. Like, you might have an encounter with an animal, or I just dieted about a week ago, and I had a virus, and so I was like, oh, do I want to open this diet? The normally how I do it is I fast for 2 days and I just drink the tree, and I was concerned about doing that while having a virus. And then I ended up just asking her, okay, like, what do I do? And she was just explaining how the virus was a part of my diet, how it's teaching me, how it's showing me that I can't just hold it the way that I traditionally hold it. That she was like, throw all that away, and
oh,
just you and I are going to have a conversation about how this diet is going to go, and you get to tell me what you want. And so each little thing was a teaching. And then I had mildew in the tent that I was gonna do a ceremony in, and I was like, oh no, like can I sit in the tent? Like, is this mold good or bad? And that encounter was just like another lesson, because the whole theme of my diet was how to deal with exposure, so like energetic exposure, but obviously mold is exposure, and that's what I was concerned about. So it's like you have an experience, but then you start to ask, like, why is this happening on my diet? Because it's never for no reason. It's always perfect. And so getting
Yeah.
information and just communicating and tuning in and asking, and that's something that obviously gets developed over time. Some people that's natural for them, and for some people it takes a while to learn how to really connect and receive and listen and communicate with the plants.
Wow. Yeah. Hmm. Interesting when you mentioned the synchronicity part. It just reminded me of a friend of mine who also does some spiritual work. And it's so interesting to see her, like, when she has a clock, and whenever the clock aligns the same digit, like let's say it's 10 o'clock, 10 minute, 10 seconds, because she has all that. Every time she sees things like that, she's so excited and she takes a photo really quickly. I'm like, why is synchronicity? So, yeah, it just came up like that. But anyway, uh, and I feel like the way you describe it also uh, helps me understand that at some point in life we also need to slow down, because everything goes so fast that we hardly have time to question anything that even happens to us or that is around us.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you describe your communication with the plant, um, it's like, okay, so slow down a little bit and then, try to ask questions, try to understand what's actually going on. So I feel like that is something that humanity is missing, especially nowadays that everything is being controlled, technology and everything. Everything has to do with speed, 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 and fast and quick.
Mm-hmm.
So just that time to slow down is really um, is something that resonate with me a lot. Yeah. So okay. Um, so can you share any personal experiences of how Noya Rao has supported your healing?
Yeah. So Noya Rao for me has been helped me do the deepest work. It's actually kind of funny because this was like a really naive, like, first intention I had in my ayahuasca ceremony. But my intention, because I was in grad school, and people talked about being afraid of their shadow, and I'm like, I don't feel afraid of anything. Like, what are they talking about? So
Yeah.
my first ayahuasca ceremony, I said, show me the deepest, darkest part of myself, which is like
Oh.
very naive intention to do on your first ceremony. But turns out, like, that intention ended up being something that unfolded for me for it was about a decade of that, like, intention.
Mm,
And it wasn't
mm,
actually until I met Noya Rao, like I said, 5 years in, where I got into that deep experience of what my biggest fear, or what the thing that was most difficult to look at. And it happened pretty quick. So the
wow.
first time I ever dieted her, I had a dream right before the diet, and I was taken down into the basement, and then it was
Mm,
kind of like dark in this basement, and then I was taken to this room, and it was felt like there's this kind of male energy behind the veil,
wow.
kind of almost like Wizard of Oz, like I was encountering it. And it was
Yeah.
it was the energy that's behind, like, torture, or like the Holocaust, and the
Oh my
thing that,
God.
like, tortures and murders and harms people in
Wow.
that way. And so that was what I experienced right before my diet. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, here we go.
Wow.
We're going right into that. And um, so right when we opened the diet, I was in ceremony. It was just me and, like, a friend, and I had told him, I was like, this is going to be really intense because I had Lyme disease. I had all kinds of energetic things. And he's like, okay, well, I'll still be there. And then probably like 20 minutes in, he's like, I'm out of here. And he got to go to a separate space because it was just really heavy and dark. But this had never happened to me. And I think it could happen just because I was it was just me and my teacher holding space for me at the time. But when I would go to purge, nothing physically would come out. Like I'd come out like thinking that I was going to throw up, but actually what started coming out was like really intense screams,
Wow.
and just like kept coming, and I could feel like I started going back through time, and like
Yeah.
you could experience each scream as like where that was coming from, and I could feel that I was back like in the witch burning times, and so I
Mm.
could feel
My God.
the
Wow.
intense re-experiencing that intense feeling of that scream, and basically being burned at the stake. And so
Wow.
she started to show me on that diet, like your fear, because I had some resistance to being opened up spiritually. Like I didn't even know that it was a trauma response until she was like, this is a trauma response because
Mm.
of your fear of being opened, and so part of
Mm.
it was like, this is what happened to you as a child that was
Mm.
threatening to me, like a lot of ghosts or things that were invasive to me that I just
Mm.
kind of blacked out. And then I'm like, I don't want to be open spiritually. And I kind of disconnected from my gifts at the beginning. But
Mm.
then she also showed me an ancestor that was burned at the stake. And so she was showing me how there's this terror that's there. If I open myself spiritually and I become a witch again in this life, I'm going to be killed. And
Mm.
that was like so
Wow.
deep in me. Like I could feel that terror, and it would it wouldn't just be terror, it would also be this fear of going crazy because,
Mm.
when they were doing that torture, they were torturing people to the point where they would just go crazy. So that fear would come up for me in ceremony, like, oh, I'm going to lose my mind.
Mm.
And so that was like the deep thing that I needed to face. And so
Mm.
I don't, I don't even know how many times I had to go back into exploring that, because I think at first I had some resistance to sitting with that level of
Mm.
terror. And that ancestor also, because she died in that way,
Mm.
she had a demonic energy to her because it just hadn't been
Mm.
resolved yet. And so the way that she would come to me, it was in like a really intense way, almost like I would describe it like if somebody's drowning, they'll freak out and they'll pull
Yeah.
you under. It
Yeah.
felt like that, like she would come at me in that way. And so I just, for a while, I couldn't
Wow.
really sit with it and just love, love her and listen to her and see what she
Mm.
needed. But the tree was the one that helped me do that. So,
Oh.
like,
Wow.
because what I find to be able to face trauma is you have to be very, very resourced. And so she would be that resource. So she would come
Mm.
in, she'd be like my anchor, where I felt like I was going into like
Mm.
deep, deep
Yeah.
darkness. It's like there's a light that's holding me. And so she would bring love to me
Mm.
and help me become more a witness. And eventually she helped me to get to a place where I could just observe it and be a witness to it and allow it to unfold and witness that witch burning and everything I needed to see or feel or experience in order to resolve that. So that's been a long journey for me. I would say even like 8 years into that, like it's not that fear doesn't sometimes come up for me, but I just feel now I can just observe it and move beyond it pretty quickly. But a lot of it was part of how I learned how to be a healer. Was like I needed to experience going
Mm.
through
Mm.
intense trauma and then also recognize that most of humanity has that trauma, somewhere
Mm.
down the line in their lineage, some more
Mm.
recent, some even, like hundreds of years ago. That was still very alive in me.
Mm.
It wasn't gone, but I mean, I don't know any, I'm a therapist and I know therapy really well and like other healing modalities, but there's nothing that's taken me into be able to see so clearly the
Mm.
ancestral trauma before until I connected with her.
Wow. Whew. Wow. What a journey. Journey of a healer. I mean, just to think about all the way you describe, like the hell you describe there, those images and the burning and so what did you make of it? Like once that became like you know clear that you were facing your traumas and those are the things that you needed to face and uh, how because those images were so vivid, like so strong, that I'm really curious to know what, beyond the fact that you understand that was your journey, you needed to face those things, but ultimately, uh, if you were to give an advice to a healer to be, someone who hasn't gone through this,
Mm-hmm.
what would be your advice? Like, how do you make sense of this thing, all the those images and this journey? What meaning do you give to that? What advice can you give a other healers who go through this kind of intense experience?
Yeah, that's why I love working with healers and walking alongside of them as Noya Rao takes them into that deeper stuff. Because what I'm
Mm,
most fascinated with when I'm looking at somebody's journey is
mm,
what is the main karmic thing that they're meant to resolve in this lifetime. Because whatever that is also connected to the greatest gift they have to offer. So over time, you can start to notice what that is in somebody. You're like, okay, it's repeating here, it's repeating here. You start to go deeper and, there's layers to it and you walk somebody through that.
mm,
And so in that journey, the way that I like to hold it is there's always the other side. So there's the deep, intense darkness that's challenging, but then there's something being developed within you at the same time that then
mm,
becomes your gift. So
mm,
like, for instance, for me, it's my greatest fear is being open energetically and spiritually, but yet that's my greatest gift that I have to
mm,
offer people because then I can channel energy. And
mm,
so when so I like to try and help people figure out what that thing is for them that they're
mm,
healing, and then be that light to remind them that yes, we go through this intense darkness, but this is the transformation that we go through, and
mm,
this is how we develop who we are and our skills. Just like the concept of the wounded healer is
mm.
that they carry a pretty big wound, in their life.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
learn everything from that. So to just mirror back to people, okay, where's the gift as well in this, and to be that reminder, because sometimes when you get pulled into a period of intense darkness, you can forget, like, oh, I'm back here again, or I'm never going to get out of it. And
Mm,
I hear that all the time, is like,
yeah,
oh, now I'm back in this again, I thought I healed
yeah,
it. Well,
yeah,
how it's different now, right? Like there's
yeah.
something, you're not where you were, but we heal in a spiral. Like it seems like we're coming back to the same place, but we're actually going deeper and deeper and deeper. And so, and at the same time, like I told you, like my resource was developed because of that. Like I had to
Mm,
be more resource to face more darkness. So that's how I built my capacity to be able to hold space for people, is to feel like, okay, I can face that amount of darkness.
mm.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. Yeah, it's one thing that you said that really makes me think. When you say at the same time you need to, be open to receive the energy, but at the same time you need to be careful. Uh, I feel like the energy work is not easy because you don't really know what comes in. When you open yourself to receiving energy and all that, anything can come in there and maybe can contribute to, that vicious cycle that people are like, well, I thought I already fixed this, but what is it? So like how to, I remember many years ago, you and I were talking about this specific aspect of spirituality, like how to at the same time be open to energy, but make sure that not everything can come through, because then you have to permanently. So I think it's a very interesting. That's why it's like almost like a permanent work, and also why a teacher is important actually to, as you described, how you can help a new healer to navigate this. Because yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
And
Mm.
and Noya Rao was a pretty amazing teacher for me around that. And people have different ways. We're all unique. But the way that I was taught, is more like these external protections, which they didn't really work very well for me. So, and it wasn't until I started working with Noya Rao where she's like, no, you have to hold love and allow it, and then it can be
Mm.
transmuted, because I'm so open that like things come through all the time, and
Yeah.
so like the shielding wasn't working. But it's more a journey of healing from the inside. So anything that you're attracting from
Mm.
outside of you
Yeah.
energetically is
Mm.
resonating with something within you that needs to be resolved. It's actually like telling you, hey, there's something here that you haven't
Oh,
looked at. And
yeah.
so she'll take you on the journey of, let's heal what's inside of you, and then you won't attract these things, or they won't be able to stick. They'll just kind of move through you or get
Mm.
transmuted.
Mm. Wow. Okay. Wow. So, what are you noticing about other people? Uh, how they're responding to their connection with Nora? How do you notice about how other people connect with her?
Yeah. So I started doing things a little bit differently, maybe like a couple of years ago when I was dieting Noya Rao. She showed me, I had been working with another healer for about 4 years and working with the Elohim and the archangels, and they opened up different channels within me to be able to deliver energy of light. And she told me,
Mm.
hey, I can come through those channels. And so instead of needing to open a traditional diet for everybody, which is not everybody's path,
Yeah.
that I could be doing energetic transmissions with people, and that the tree would
Mm.
connect to them and start to guide them and teach them and help them
Mm.
heal. And so I started doing these energy transmissions, mostly
Mm.
online. So pretty much,
Mm.
I'm a therapist too. So I see people one on one. And then, so
Yeah.
most of my clients are also working with Noya Rao, because
Mm.
there's just a level of depth that she will take them that I can't take them there. And so there's a few things that I notice when they're working with Noya Rao. Is one is she's very good at, instead of, let's say in like a therapy session, we're kind of like intentionally trying to go back into something, maybe a trauma, we're feeling into it, and there might be pieces that we're not accessing yet. But what the tree will do is she'll just bring it up to your consciousness. So kind of like I
Mm.
described with the ancestor healing, like that would have been really hard to get to. She was just like, it's right here. This witch burning
Mm.
happened, and this is the trauma, and
Yeah.
this is what you need to sit and look at and feel. And so you have that intelligence coming through, showing you. And so what will happen is often, when you're first doing the work, certain things that haven't been processed will come up just kind of unexpectedly. Like all of a sudden, you have fear coming up or anger, and you have to sit with it and be like, where is this coming from? Because it's not something that just happened in the moment. It's something that is much deeper that she's trying to show you. And so that kind of thing will happen. Unprocessed stuff will start to come to the surface. People will start to have insights around it, because the way that
Oh.
I see how we resolve is not just, we have to feel it and experience it, and then we have to get whatever lesson our soul was meant to learn. When without that lesson and
Mm.
completion, then we see patterns play out over and over and over and over again.
Mm.
But
Mm.
she helps us actually complete it so that it's not repeating anymore, and that comes from part of the insight. It's like, learn what your soul was meant to learn, and then you can kind of graduate from that thing. And
Mm.
there's
Yeah.
karmically that they teach us our entire life. Like I said, you're like, this again, like, and it's like, yep, still more to learn from this thing. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So that's a big one, is like getting a flash of insight where you're like, oh, like that's what I'm supposed to be learning from this. And
Yeah.
then the other piece that I've noticed a lot through the transmissions is, and this is also like, just to give a disclaimer, I'm also working with some technology from the angelic realm. So like
Yeah.
that comes in, and the combination is that a lot of people describe having a little bit more distance around their reaction. So
Mm,
being in an observer stance, just like meditation practices, is like, I'm going to observe my thoughts. I'm not going to become my thoughts. And there's
mm,
enough distance where then you're not like overtaken by, overwhelmed by whatever it is. You're just like, oh, okay, like fear's coming up. Like, what do I need to see about this? And how do I want to respond versus just being taken over by fear and reacting? There's a
mm,
little bit of distance. So I noticed that that is starting to happen more over time. And
mm.
then I've also noticed how this healing technology will go in and make energetic adjustments on people. And so people will shake, or they'll be like, actually your spine has a lot to do with your alignment.
Yeah.
So like your back,
Yes.
people will
Yeah.
shake, and all of a sudden things will fall into place, and then things start
Mm,
opening up, the energy starts flowing
yeah.
better, you start to get more connected, you're
Mm,
in this alignment where then when you're coming from that alignment, it's much easier to receive messages and guidance.
mm,
And then
mm,
it's also like this new technology that we have for our time, to
mm.
that we're able to activate things within us a little bit easier. So if you think about our bodies almost as like a computer, where it's like this, we haven't updated all the software yet, like there's
Yeah.
actually like spots where
Yeah.
the energy will go to activate it. And so
Mm,
the and that means opening of certain gifts that you haven't been able to access yet. Sometimes it requires you to do some healing first. Like for me, I shared the example of, I had fear of being open energetically because I had trauma around it. So I had to
yeah.
heal a lot of that so that I could become more open, because I had blocked
Mm,
my abilities off.
yeah.
But then also, I just notice as you do kind of, I call them upgrades, or a lot of people call them upgrades, like upgrade your software, like, and then you
Oh,
get,
yeah.
it's like getting a new car where you're like, oh, this works more efficiently, my body works more efficiently, like my healing abilities start working better, and these kinds of things that start to happen over time. Once you've done some clearing on yourself, a lot of people, you have to clear out, any drugs you've ever done,
Mm,
pharmaceuticals, energies, all these energies that you've picked up over time that haven't been cleared, that need to be cleared. And once that starts to clear, like I notice people's intuitive abilities start to open up more. They just get more clarity and insights come through.
yeah. I know I've seen you clear your energy many times, but yeah, I'm just curious how you, if you can share a little bit, how will you clear energy? How will you cleanse yourself a little bit? Because toxicity is like ambient, it's everywhere, it's all the time. But
Mm-hmm.
the kind of work you do needs a little bit of, I don't want to say purity, but it kind of needs a little bit of clean space to receive certain things. So how do you clean that? How do you cleanse a little bit? Like, do you want to share about that, or?
Yeah, I mean, my main modality is working through the chanting. So when you diet the plants and you build these connections, they start to gift you melodies, and they'll start to open up your voice. So
Mm,
like they'll work on your voice so that you can make certain sounds that
mm,
will clear things energetically. So for me, the
mm,
best way is to open up my channel, call in Noya Rao, my guides, and have them sing through me. And then, and how that works is often I'll feel something, or they'll show me like, oh, you have something in
mm.
your, like right here on your
Yeah.
throat. And so it's like, okay, now I'm visualizing the energy going into my throat, and I'm singing into it
Mm,
and clearing it. So that's
Wow.
one way. And then ways that don't involve that level of skill is like Epsom salt baths are good every once in a while. I don't find that you can just sage major things off. I wish it was that easy where I could just be like, shh,
Yeah, I
family.
know, right? Yeah,
It
yeah,
seems to
I
be
know.
more complicated than that. Yeah.
That would be like everybody will want that, right? But it doesn't happen like that. Need to go through the process. Need to do the work.
What was it for you, or in your tradition, or the ways that your mother would work? How did they work with plants, or what did they work with to cleanse?
Ah, well, it's it's really interesting when you share your experience because it kind of reminds me of my own journey with my mom, who was also a healer, and she works a lot with plants and um, barks of trees and like so many things. And she had like every plan for every single problem that exists. Like, okay, this plan is for if you have bad luck, or this plan is if you want success on bad days. So she had so many things, like I would burn that, we would inhale and stuff, open up. So it was just, it was, the thing is, for me, as I was growing up and going to school and all that, I was more, born African as an African, and like everything is pretty much spiritual. Even interaction with family, nature, everything is really spiritual. So, but I was more interested in acquiring Western knowledge, which means like rationalism, going to school, being able to explain everything. So, and that was a little bit the little argument that I always have with my mom, because for some reason she saw something in me in terms of being a healer. And because she was a healer and she predicted everything about most things about my life when I was still a young boy, she predicted like 10, 20 years ahead. And when she passed away and things started happening as she had predicted in my life and really pinpoint like things specific, I was like, wow, I was really scared, right? Like, hey, this woman really was up to something, right? But, when she was still alive, I never listened to her. Like, oh, just give me a break with, this spiritual stuff and all that, blah, blah, blah. I want, if you can explain this thing rationally to me, then we can have a conversation, right? I was more like, go to school, go to university, get the degrees, read the books, and explain things rationally and all that. Uh, but it took me the experience that we had at the school, and to reconnect with that. To when I got acquired this Western knowledge that I really crave so much, and I realized that I had a big hole. It was really something really really empty in my soul, in my spirit, because I had disconnected completely with my Africanness and my mother's teaching. So I had to kind of reconnect with my African roots and try to really reconnect with my mom's teaching. And thankfully, she is always there. Every time I really am stuck and I really, really have no way of making sense of anything and super confused, I just need to sleep a little bit. And then she will just appear in a way and we'll have a conversation like in during an awakening time. And she, will kind of point me to direction, but she wouldn't give me like clear answers, but she would really like nudge me in different ways because I still need to do the work to really unpack what she was trying to really tell me. And yeah, and I have to think very hard to reconnect and to remember the plants and the barks of trees and all those herbs that she had and worked with that was so efficient in a lot of things that I had to do in my life. So yeah, it was interesting. But that's why when you share your experience with Noya Rao, I kind of connect in a way. I'm like, I was right inside that space, as I was growing up, but I was like not really open to it, even though it
Mhm.
was working through me, all of my mom's work. And that's what I'm really, really grateful to really listen to your experience. Yes, it's so interesting. You as a Westerner, as an American who kind of, crave for this knowledge and open yourself to this knowledge, connect with the plants and all that. Me as someone, an African, was born into it and ran so fast away from it, to get the Western knowledge, just to realize that I still kind of, in a way, need to reconnect with that plants because, after all,
Mhm.
it all comes down to, nature and all the
Mhm.
healings that we have in nature. Yeah. So, but I'm just curious, like, how is Noya Rao supporting our collective awakening? Like, how will you describe that?
Yeah, because that's been a big thing that's come through around working with her. Because I mean, people on the path that I'm on, like usually they'll work with lots of different plants, but once I connected to Noya Rao, it was like, oh yeah, I remember you. I remember our mission. And so I have a shared mission with her. And so the way that I feel her mission comes through me, which, it can be come through other people differently, but is to support people through going through a pretty massive healing and awakening. Because the way that I understand this period of time is that our consciousness is evolving super fast, and that there are beings on earth that are supporting us. So, some people, they're like, there's figures that have come to earth, like Jesus or Buddha, and they have this major message that they give for that time, and it has a huge impact on humanity. And so some people say that there's multiple figures that come during this time now. And Noya Rao to me is one of those figures that's an embodied, on earth, enlightened, well, embodied in a tree, but an enlightened being that's offering teachings in a way that I feel like people can take in, because I think some people feel just kind of like they push away Christianity and some of these ideas that they were taught, and and then for it to come through a tree and more of a feminine energy, like I feel like lot more people can get on board with that, of like, okay, we're not repeating, they're just kind of whatever the patriarchal wound is around that, history. And so she comes in and teaches people in a similar way, like, this is the path to enlightenment. This is the path to reconnect to you as in your highest essence. So I would consider that like, each one of us is an aspect of the divine, but in our ego consciousness, we can easily forget that relationship and that connection. And so it's a period of time of, kind of like I described, that alignment that connects you to a higher consciousness, that connects you to the divine aspect of you, that then you start to connect to and start to embody that here, which is what I see as like the awakening, is that we all start to embody that essence. And so I would say supporting that. And then also the way that I've heard it from certain guides, that they say humanity can only go through this massive evolution once we've processed what's in the collective first, which is a lot of stuff that
Yeah,
hasn't been
yeah,
resolved, as we know,
yeah,
because we're still in wars and genocide and all this
yeah,
stuff is happening over and over again, and we
yeah.
haven't completed the karmic cycle yet. And so so the way that I'm seeing it is in ceremonies, people that have done a lot of their work and they're resourced, is that she will first like start to activate people, that like, I want you to be Ebede, I want you to be in your highest power in this ceremony. So I'm going to align you and connect you to your highest self, and then do it to 5 other people. And now we're operating from the highest possible way. Our healers, the abilities that we didn't even know we had until we're needing to use them in this moment. And then people start to drop into deeper stuff that's not individual, it's collective, it's ancestral, and there's themes, and people become aware. Maybe not everybody notices it, but it's like, oh, we're processing something together that has to do with this deep wound. Like, for example, one of our ceremonies was this deep wound to wound to the feminine. It had to do with rape and all these things that needed to be processed on a collective level that multiple people felt in different ways and were releasing. And so I think with that level of light that she brings, that we're able to start to feel all of that and transmute it. So it's not just feeling it, but it's also we're having realizations on the behalf of the collective. So if you think of humanity as like one collective psyche that needs to be healed, it's like if you're having realizations on the behalf of the collective. So like multiple people having these realizations, humanity will start to wake up. And so that's another aspect. And then another one, the way that I've seen it in a ceremony was I was seeing how, and it wasn't just Noya Rao, it's other beings too, that they were bringing in so much light into each person, clearing out, purifying, helping to purify, helping them to hold that amount of light, which is, it takes a little bit of time. When you first get beamed with that amount of light, some people just knock out. Like I used to pass out for like 2 days after getting that
Yeah.
amount of light running through me. And then eventually you can hold that light. And so if you think about, thousands of people all bringing in that light, it's just the frequency on the planet just increasing
Yeah.
rapidly. And so
Wow.
that is in a higher frequency. When you feel a higher frequency, you're much more connected to the observer, to your higher self, to your
Yeah.
divine aspect, to unity consciousness. And so that's what's a big aspect of how her energy's spreading and why I feel like she showed me how to work with her, not just in ceremony, but people, they don't have to ingest any psychedelic medicine. They just receive her transmissions sober, and then they have a whole healing experience. So it's able to reach more people, as opposed to if it was just ceremony in one place of the world, that's a very few amount of people.
I think I belong to that category of people who don't need to ingest anything, but can really absorb this because I think for me, for some reason, I feel like I can receive spiritual energy. I can receive messages. I can receive things. I don't need to be in an altered state of consciousness. I don't need to ingest anything to be in a space or state to get it. I know some people might want that to kind of facilitate that channeling, but
Mm-hmm.
I think I belong to the category that really, in a clear awakening state, can really, really connect with that.
Yeah.
As you were talking, you also mentioned something like we haven't completed the karmic cycle, and that kind of like, well, okay, can you like? I don't know if I my question means to for you to tell us if there is. I don't want to say a timeline. Like, are we ever going to complete that cycle? Because I feel like it's the history of humanity, or how would you explain this aspect of not completed this karmic cycle? Because you understand the question I'm trying to ask you, right? Like how, what do you mean by that? Like we are in this cycle. Like, are we going to be able to complete it at some point in our human history and then start a new cycle? If yes, what will that look like? If not, then what? I don't know. Do you see a little bit the question that I'm trying to? I know it might be like an unfair question because it's
Yeah.
very, it's not easy, but yeah,
I mean, first, I think to just start describe it on an individual level would be helpful. So, like, I think we're all familiar, right, of patterns where we act out the same thing, like, oh, I'm back in
yeah,
that same relationship, like again, and so
yeah,
we keep attracting the same thing. And so
yeah,
the way that I see karma is like they're kind of like knots that need to be disentangled because we
mm,
there's some sort of wound or something that's unresolved there, and that's why we keep repeating it. And then once that's
yeah,
resolved, then
yeah.
we stop. So
Okay.
then if you think about that on like a bigger scale of humanity, like what are
Mm,
the things that we're still playing
yeah.
out? It's kind of unconscious, that's not
Mm,
really necessary. and then to actually feel and process that. So it's like, let's
Mm,
just say for the example of like torture and
mm,
disconnecting people from their traditions and lineages, like thinking about the long history that that's been happening, where we used to
mm,
be much more connected to the earth, and we were had this earth-based understanding. There was more of this understanding that we're interconnected, and then we started to move away from that, where we became more individualistic. And you
mm,
could see that happening more, I would say, more visibly in Western culture, because a lot of those original traditions were wiped out a while ago. People lost all their connections to the songs they sang and the traditions. It was just a big erasure. And so now the way that I see it is that we're coming back to remembering that interconnectedness again.
mm.
And so, but that means we have to heal all the trauma that we went through
Yeah,
over that period of time, instead of repeating it, because we're repeating it now, right? It's like we're still
yeah,
killing each other and trying to control people. And so, does that ever resolve? I mean, that's it's hard to say, but I would say that some guides have mentioned that yeah, we're reaching a different state of consciousness, and then that would be operating differently. And how
mm,
that happens, there's many
mm,
different ideas about how that happens, but that we would come into relationship again in harmony with the earth, because we would have to, because we wouldn't survive without it. It's kind of, it can't go on that much longer until we
yeah,
just can't even survive. So we're going to be forced
yeah,
into doing it at some point.
yeah, definitely. So now that we are concluding our conversation, is there anything, any final thoughts that you have that you want to share to conclude?
Hmm. I feel pretty complete with most of everything that I shared. It's just
Mm,
that, oh, I guess there is one more thing, because you mentioned I'm somebody who I don't need to ingest, psychedelic medicine. And just
mm,
to that was one teaching that actually ayahuasca gave me, and Noya Rao together, that they were
mm,
saying that at a certain period of time, people didn't need to ingest such psychedelic medicine because they were so connected already. And then we went
mm.
deep to sleep. And so then
Yeah,
people needed ayahuasca in particular to like bust open,
yeah,
all the
yes,
blocks around
yeah,
spirituality, so people could see it. And then they were saying, but now we're moving back towards our awakening, where people are going to not need it as much. I just wanted to add to the part where you mentioned that you're one of those people that doesn't need psychedelic medicine. And that's a really important part, because that's something that Noya Rao has brought forth to me, is that there's ways of connecting people to Noya Rao without needing to ingest any psychedelic medicine. And that happens through energy transmissions. And so she's supported me and my partner with being able to channel her in a different way, where it's more effective to transmit the energy to people without using any medicine at all. And so we do this frequently, usually at least once a month on potent days of the year, where we do online transmissions, where we're connecting people to Noya Rao so that they can receive her healing and guidance and teachings. And this way, it's accessible to anyone wherever they are in the world. And also, it supports us in our collective healing. So when we all come together to do this work, then it just gets amplified. And so that ripples out into the collective. And that's a big part of the mission with her, is to support humanity with their awakening on a wider scale. So if you feel interested in ever joining us, if you look underneath the video, there's a link to our website where it shows events, and we keep updated on events that we're offering that you can receive online. And also, if you want to connect to us, meet us in person, you're also welcome to reach out about that. And thank you so much, Ebade, and thank you everybody for listening.